I'll take the extra rough AD. Been thinking about finding a new friend group because getting tired of some things repeating, but was sticking to one for so long that I don't really have an idea how to do it. Well, that's interesting. You're talking about an online group or how to find a gathering socially outside? Often finding a source of emotional investment vicariously from people watching is a very great place to start. So peruse around the internet to resonate with an online community at a arm's length, and then find a source of gathering for them, and introduce yourself into the community based on that emotional investment. Focusing on how you feel is probably a great way. So, for example, oh, you know what? I've been down in a rabbit hole watching about how people do competitive underwater basket weaving. I figure I come here. Is this a place where we can talk about it? I get really excited. What excites you about it? And that's a pretty fair place to start. Just prefer to share personality or interest similarities, otherwise it's really difficult to keep it going for you. That's gonna be tough because personality is not malleable as in that pace, and interest similarities is not very malleable online as well. Generally speaking, unconditional emotional investment keeps a friendship ring going. However, you can often find that it's sufficient to have multiple rings of friendship, so then you can bounce between them. It's healthier, it's generally more common than not to have multiple groups of friends, and those particular friends have specific personalities and interest similarities, but that's where it generally ends. So when one wants to break the mold or try to find variety, you bounce between multiple friends groups. It can be very difficult to break in if you have specifically one ring of friends. Having to redo that, right? Try to break into another ring can be difficult, but the more rings you break into, the more skilled and intuitive it becomes. Often, instead of talking about replacing a friend ring, it's more like expanding your different circles. And it still goes back to finding an emotional connection, then introducing yourself to a gathering place emotionally first, and then establishing that emotional connection will allow you. It kind of supersedes a lot of times the shared personality or interest similarities if the emotional investment is there. So for example, technically I don't interact with a lot of friend circles. However, I do have 4 friend circles. I'm more of a loner, but a lot of times any of those 4 or 5 friend circles will elicit a different type of behavior, personality, or similarities that I can use to either educate myself or entertain myself in some way. Those 4 or 5 are mutually exclusive of each other, of course, because they do not overlap. So not having one that can balance different friend circles is one that do not really want to unify themselves into one like archetype. For example, sometimes when you're balancing different friend circles, you may have this inclination that you want them to like each other or hang out with each other. That would be a telltale sign that you're looking for fewer friend circles and you have the mindset of replacing and substituting friend circles, which can help you inform on what you're looking for or how selective you have to be. In this case, I would say the strongest thing is an emotional tether. An emotional tether makes it nearly unconditional, that if personalities change, if interest shifts, the emotional tether tends to make it all right. At least not as scary. It makes you stick it out. If you prioritize things like specific personality or specific interest, those things are unchanging. So when you feel, if you get tired, like for one of the drawbacks that you just mentioned, that things keep repeatedly happening, that is selecting and interacting with people with specific personalities and interest in mind. They come with repeated consistency regarding the personalities and interest. Gotta hit the breaking in grind set. Yeah, like take chances, right? And be aware that you are the one that's going to have to pay a entry fee. And your entry fee, the stronger the entry fee is, the more you're willing to invest in it. So an emotional entry fee is probably likely the one that's the strongest. I've actually tried finding small groups of people online, but the problem I have is that I don't have anything to say and just keep being stuck observing what they're up to. Didn't feel like sharing the experience. Yeah, that's the entry fee. So what you have to say generally is, if you feel really strong about breaking into a group, being able to express emotionally so that they can resonate with you emotionally, not necessarily what you're saying, but how you're saying it. So for example, someone who breaks into a group and says, wow, this technique does this and this. Well, everyone in the group probably knows what the technique does because that's a similarity in interest. However, it may be different when you express it. It's like, I'm not really happy with this technique, and I hope we can discuss about why it makes me unhappy, but I really care about this technique enough to share that I'm unhappy with it. And some people might try to convince you, well, they're happy with it. And that type of discussion, it's an emotional investment. So you are more concerned and they are more concerned about how each other are feeling, not necessarily if you have common interests or not. Common interest is something that will stay the same ultimately, because you know enough information and they know enough information about a common interest, but they don't know how you think about it and how they think about it. So one could introduce themselves and say, I'm unhappy with this. I know all these things, and I assume you do too. That's why I came here. I'm unhappy with this. How do you feel about this particular thing? Can you tell me your version of pros and cons regarding this interest? And that establishes emotional trust. Once that's established, it's really unlikely that the interest and the personalities are going to change over time. But people's feelings and knowing about the people's feelings can go back and forth depending on how often you share. Because if you share that you're really unhappy about this, they might change and be a little bit more considerate of, oh, you know, I didn't think about that, or I didn't realize that could be upsetting. I've always been in the mind that this is very great. This feature is fantastic in this game, for example. Something like that. It is difficult though. The grinding mindset, right? The grinding mindset you're talking about, the breaking in grinding mindset deals with repeatedly paying for the emotional investment of maybe someone's just going to be a jerk to you, or maybe someone's just going to cling to you a lot, or thinks that type of scare or fear is your payment. It's what is going to make you want, presumably it's going to make it feel rewarding when it works, but it's going to be a toll. Like it's your payment for trying to break into a group. It's one of the quicker ways to break in because you're paying a lot. But if you are watching at an arm's distance, that's probably the lowest amount of investment you can do before you take the big plunge, right? And that's the investment, the sharing part. Although it sounds like you're pragmatically approaching it in the same way. Slowly, you know, look for something that you're willing to share. But one mindset or one barrier you have to think about is until you share, you're collecting, you're knowing, you're learning knowledge, but you're not applying them yet until the point you share your opinions. Then you're applying the knowledge, and that creates what you're paying for in rejection, makes your knowledge more valuable the moment you apply it. So you can know a lot of things, like I know a lot about Neverwinter, right? Whoever played this game as long as I have probably know a lot about Neverwinter. However, you can know a lot and then you apply it for yourself. For example, yeah, I know what's advantageous, what's best in slot and whatnot. You apply it for yourself. That's a value of 1. That's a value for yourself. How do you apply it for other people? How do you track other people who want to invest? Well, you think about what other people think about the knowledge you have. So how does what you do affect others, and how what you do may either hurt, be advantageous, or be disadvantageous to others? Then that sharing creates emotional investment, or it opens an opportunity. So if you were drawing people to you, for example, which is my example here, however, you do the reverse when you're trying to break into a group. You have to give something to that group in order to be able to be memorable. So if you just say things you know, they aren't memorable. They overlap. Sharing characteristics of personality that is attached to interest similarities tend to overlap with everyone. Oh yeah, you're just another fan that likes to do so-and-so and play so-and-so. That's it. So it overlaps with pretty much everyone else in that group, but you're the one breaking into the group. So these guys on the surface from the outside, you're probably observing that they have similar interests and similar personalities, and they're going back and forth with banter, but what they have you cannot see, which is all the times that they share together with an emotional tether. So when you're witnessing an in-group that's playing a game together, the things you observe is probably about the game per se, or the interest. You don't see the history between them. You don't see, sometimes you might glean some inside jokes if they make it public, or like things that are implicit, like this guy is ratting on one of the members, But your interpretation would be they're probably having fun, you know, being bros and whatnot. It could mean entirely different thing. It has baggage, it has emotional tether. So you're trying to immediately create that tether as an outsider going into it. And the first thing you have to pay for is fast tracking yourself to establishing an emotional tether between someone or a group of people. It ends up being a practice in the life skill of being conscientious. As in, I have no idea what they're really interested in, as in emotionally interested in, regarding the game. I'm gonna just shoot and try. The easier method, or the more consistent method, is often starting with something you spent a lot of time working on expressing yourself, and then asking them how they feel about it. So you can go up to a stranger and say, you know, I see you playing, I'm gonna use this specific case since we're streaming Neverwinter. I see you played 5,000 hours of Neverwinter. Sorry, I looked at your profile. You played 5,000 hours of Neverwinter. You know, I have a few things to say about X, Y, and Z regarding the most recent module patch. And I just want to share how I feel, and I want to hear your take on this. So the idea is, instead of having to guess or be scared of what the attitude of this person is, you just remove that and you kind of prime it with how you feel, right? So at least you can say something that you know pretty well, which is whatever you're feeling, and then offering the open hand to hearing what the other person has to say. And that usually is a pretty great place to start. It can be tough following what happens after, because in this way, there's nothing after. Like, there's no advice per se after. It's all dependent on your life skills, your ability to follow the conversation, follow the discussion, and be a great judge of character and know where the conversation goes. But that comes with practice, and everyone has a different approach to it. But the entrance, the initiation, tends to be pragmatically the same, which is to establish an emotional bond as quickly as possible. That's generally how like a viewer meets a streamer. The ones that tend to stay, or the ones that tend to form the connection, is the one that maybe took the risk of expressing something personal, asking the other person, and that other person responds and reflects on that something personal as well, and that would immediately happen. If saying something like a pleasantry, like, oh, this game's great, because you observe that this streamer said this game is great, then that's it. That the conversation just ends there most of the time, because you're establishing commonality, but you're not also establishing uniqueness. Why do you think it's great? The streamer hasn't shared why they think this game is great, but you can use the idea that both of you think the game is great and then share something that is unique to yourself. It's incredibly important that it has to be something unique to yourself to demonstrate that you're willing to take the risk of expressing something that is risky. And oftentimes there's this stigma of you know, you have trolls, right? Trolls come on and say, this game sucks, and leaves. And when we're not talking about that type of thing, like to be a contrarian kind of thing. We're talking about, I see that you like this game, and I'm not quite sold on it. Here's why, and I want to hear from you why my points are not big enough, perhaps, to make you have mixed feelings about this game too, or things like that. So something a little bit that shows, yeah, you might not, if you clearly don't agree with this person, the idea is you're challenging the person to make you care. Or you could challenge the person. It's a little bit unreliable to try to gaslight the person into liking what you like or disliking what you like. It's a little bit more endearing when you say, well, you know what? Sorry, I'm going to do a meme here. It's like, this game sucks. Prove me wrong kind of thing, right? But not in those phrasing. In fact, I feel like that meme has become more of, I'm not going to listen to you kind of thing. Instead, it can be a little bit more delicate. Like, I really want to get into this, but I've only been watching for a week. What do you think? What do you think is the thing that got you into this after the first week? That kind of thing. So you're like mining for curiosity and investment. Like, I see you played this game for 3 years, and I've only played for 3 months, and we can't ever share this bond of having the same amount of plays, right? Like, I can't ever play as much as you if you already started 3 years in advance. So the idea then would be, if you're invested, it's like, how do I catch up with you? Or like, how do I catch up with you with a mindset thing? Is there any form of wisdom you can impart on me? And then, do you remember what it was like when you first started, in 3 months? It's okay if you don't remember. I just want to know what I'm getting myself into, right? That kind of thing. It's just just various examples. I didn't end up finding, now refocusing, I didn't find an opportunity, so I think we're gonna do some closing remarks regarding this module. Hopefully that offers some inspiration. Just talking about it also helps, so I was just giving you some examples. Alright, so with that notion, it's very important about breaking into circles, because MMORPGs are about breaking into circles all the time. Sometimes you have to break into a lot of circles in MMORPGs, because you leave alliances, you leave guilds, you leave cliques. Even within the game, there's a subculture, and Neverwinter is most definitely one of them. You kind of learned that really early if you were during the World of Warcraft days. The early days when there weren't really automatic matchmaking and things that remove the need for self-selection. So before Neverwinter, there was the rudimentary World of Warcraft kind of things, and you have to self-select yourself into groups. So that includes having the skills to be a good judge of character and deduce these things. There's no like, oh, your rank is 20, my rank is 20, we're gonna get matched up. Like, your elo is this, my elo is this, we're going to get matched up. That kind of thing. All automated matchmaking is the wave of the Neverwinter and on wave, where everything to socialize, to meet people, the skills required to do those things, the life skills that are required to do those things, were removed, like, out of convenience. So faster matchmaking, faster groups, queues, metric systems, like what your item level is, what your gear set is, what did you complete, title systems, stickers, achievements, metrics, more metrics, sorry, metrics are redundant, like percentage completions, what level you are. All these metrics made socializing and communicating and relying on your intuition or the practice skills become non-essential. So you no longer practice these skills, not even in a gaming sense. However, back in World of Warcraft, and maybe the early days of Neverwinter, because this queuing system right here and dungeon queuing system was incredibly like early days. And in the early days, you had to form cliques, you had to form groups, and those groups lead to drama, conflict of interest, best friends you'll ever meet, all the above. But it comes with tons of growing pains, intuitive skill development, and probably leadership, charisma, things that you have to develop over time to be successful at a game. And matchmaking was one of them, especially grouping up and all that. So in the world we live today, right, I would say a deep cut, this would be a deep cut on Neverwinter as well, which will be a good segue into my conclusion about Demon Web Pit's quality of life stuff. In this modern day and age, you have to remember, at least I think it's a deep cut and it's worth keeping in mind, that all the conveniences that we have online is incredibly convenient. However, there's a cost as well. There's a trade-off. All the conveniences remove the need for you to practice skills that you could argue are obsolete. However, I would argue that any skills you don't have, or any skills that you could have, are skills that you don't know if you'll need or be able to use or integrate. So to me, the answer generally is, why not both? If you have a queue system, right? For example, random queuing and all that stuff, you could use that. Actually, in this case, Neverwinter makes a great example. The vast majority of players still just queue by word of mouth instead of relying on metric queue systems, right? This stuff, in fact, this is the butt end of the joke in Neverwinter. Random queues, you just have spuriousness. You just get plucked together using these arbitrary metrics, and these metrics are not comprehensive. So this random queuing is almost closer to IRL than the preferred method of queuing in this game, which is word of mouth. And it's always in the chat, which I'm blocking, like I'm literally blocking. And the idea is that Neverwinter is an aged group. Its community is an age group. It generally the behavior that they sustain is the idea of forming cliques and groups. It is these things that were implemented later in this game's lifespan is to improve to meet the standards of the new online community, which is the ones where no, you don't have to socialize to be matched up. You don't need communication skills. You're grouped and pre-selected by metrics that are arbitrarily actually designed by the developers to best estimate how to get like-minded people together. And it's incredibly rudimentary because, like I mentioned about personalities and interest goals, typically these queues work on metrics that don't necessarily reflect the players that they're pre-selecting for. They're pre-selecting for objective. So yeah, these guys all want to complete this dungeon, put them together. Okay, well, this dungeon requires this arbitrary metric that this game promotes you to do, like gear score. Put them together. And then hope that that is good enough if you have enough metrics. Like if you had 3 or 4 metrics together, 4 coincidences is really good. It's like really nice. So the likelihood of success will go up when you have 4. Add another 5, it might go up even more. And the idea is that's how also humans interact, but they're removing that. So automatic queuing systems, ELO, MMR, that stuff is removing the need to practice it without any of these metrics. So now you ask yourself, how do I make the best friend I'll ever have where this person's metrics continuously change? You can't. You need to develop the skills to do it on the fly. An automated system has to change its automated system every single time a person changes. So the dynamics of a person is not mirrored in any of these things. And now, one of the most dominant online gaming interactions uses performance metrics, right? Because you put PvP games use performance metrics. The downside to that is performance metrics do have a loose association to personality and self-selection. However, those personality and self-selections means that you don't get to be part of that selection process. The game is selecting it for you. The interest is selecting it for you. So the things you're interested in, you're already pre-selecting for the characteristics that will likely happen. And the better you understand that through conscientiousness, like practicing what the other person is thinking, the more likely you'll end up picking a group that you best fit in, or a group that you're looking for. And in order to do that, you actually have to practice. So you have to take chances. Like, well, this group didn't work out. That's okay. Now I know. Next group, the next group, and the more reflection you collect, the more likely you'll pick, in the future, you'll be able to pick out things that, like, I like this thing, and I'm pretty sure the group is going to resonate largely with me. And that's kind of like the goal, right? And that's kind of one of the deep cuts about what developers could do as quality of life changes for live service games. And remember, live service games also include every single PvP title. PvP titles, the ones that are top 10 activity, they're live service models. Some of them might not seem like live service models, but they have overlapping building quality of life changes that is required to sustain the game over the course of its life. Like, it's not a one take. You don't buy the game and that's it. It's not a completion title. Any PvP title and live service model have to promote the idea that this is here to stay. It is constantly revolving. So this is going to be a segue into my evaluation of Neverwinter, especially the most recent, today is the last day of Demon Web Spit, so I'm going to review this. Let me pull this up first. I need to pull this up because we're going to make this into a moment. I forgot to make it into a moment the last time I did the last module. Well, you'll see what I mean when I go through some of the deep cuts. Where's my stream manager? Okay, here it is. Okay. It does give something. Now I just have to process all that. That's the only problem standing in the way of making new connections. Having to rest on new ideas to let it sink in. Yeah. I don't know why my brain... Yeah. So I don't want to tell you. There's no possible way I know why your brain works like that. It's nice to know that when you talk about these things more frequently, you just pick out. I would say I'm pretty confident that most people will be able to feel out what works for them. My goal most of the time is that I try to share the most normalized behavior stuff As in, I don't know how your brain works, but I can at least tell you what your brain is exposed to. And the thing about psychology a lot of times is when you become complacent, as in you become exposed to a specific lifestyle choices, those are the things that if someone explains or notes those things, it can help you figure out why your brain works like that in a way. Like, for example, I am not particularly good at anything, like any specific thing, especially for gaming. Why is that? Because I don't focus on anything, right? So if someone asks me, well, what was the last task you did for more than 3 years or like a year, I would have to say running, but you can't see that, right? So in terms of video games, it's rarely ever consistent. So things like that, just normalizing things, having someone point out things that you are exposed to all the time can be helpful in finding ways to manipulate your lifestyle. I think PvP, one of the biggest PvP problems to some people, loners will be really, really great with the current PvP model. Like people who are ambitious, self-motivated, inwardly focusing. If they're great, that's all the feedback they need. If you're looking for friends and looking to cooperative play or sharing interest and whatnot, the PvP model really doesn't do much for those life skills. And one of the biggest reasons is PvP is convenient and low effort because you don't need to talk to anyone. Like, yes, you could argue, oh, but if people communicate, they're more likely to win. But it removes that barrier. It's to this date, PvP matchmaking has removed the barrier to communicate far, far more than it has ever been, regardless if it is essential for victory or not, or increasing your win ratio or not. In fact, here's another great example of how far this has gone. The most successful PvP models are the ones that emphasize even playing field and individual contribution. Not only that, the ones that would promote, even past the matchmaking, the need and stringency for communication skills, those pale in comparison to individualized PvP games, like in popularity. So the odds of anyone who says I like PvP games, they are likely playing a game that's dominantly emphasizing individual performance. Like the statistic, you are more likely to play those games because there are so many more of them, and they are more mainstream than the ones that are cooperative in nature. And without that cooperative stringency, you're not going to practice skills that involve communication, even at the essential level. Like the bare bones level that people make friends with is if we have common interest. In PvP games, rarely do you even do that anymore. You assume those things because a system removed it altogether. Like the system completely removed it. You don't need to do those things anymore. The game tells you this is your objective. You know, when after the matchmaking and the ranks and the elo selecting and all that, now the game tells you this is your objective. Here are all the stat breakdowns. Here's all your KDA ratios. These are all you need to pay attention to. You don't even process anymore that the person behind, there's a person behind all those numbers and what those numbers mean about a person. Like, you just know that this person is performing, underperforming, contributing, not contributing, this person's in the right place or not. You don't process the idea that these numbers tell you something about the person. So it's no longer, oh man, this person isn't getting any kills. You're not asking why or how or what's keeping this person from getting kills. You just know your objective that this person isn't getting any kills, and it ends there. So you're no longer evaluating game design, philosophy, your players by who they are, what they do, why they like to do certain things. You only see them as numbers and statistics. And that's a very objective-minded way the internet has conditioned most people to look at. Views, likes, popularity, metric. It's what machines and algorithms do super well, especially like machine learning and AI power results. It's very objective, as in lots of statistics and pattern recognition. Regrettably, all of that only demonstrates and accentuates and normalizes non-human skills. So when you start talking to someone, you're gonna ask them, oh, you played for 100 hours, instead of, why do you play a lot? Or, wow, you're really good, you're rank 100, instead of, what made you want to be a good player? Well, what was your ideal rank, actually? So you start evaluating everyone and presume everyone more easily, sort of, because it's statistic based. All the metrics that we got reduces the human being into not their motivations, their feelings, their drives, and their life. It reduces them to numbers. And unfortunately, or fortunately, if you're okay with that, you'll thrive. If you're not okay with that, one thing that it gets in the way of is that you have no idea how to express yourself anymore. Like, you have no practice in working out what these numbers mean to me. Why do I even play this game anymore? And the idea, like, for example, you ask someone who's detached from it, why do you love this game? It's like, well, it's to get good gear so I can do more damage. Okay. That not only does not express much to the other person might not even be aware that they only confine themselves to each other based on what their gear and their damage does. So soon you're gonna end up like, in my opinion, a large majority of gatekeepers in Neverwinter, where they evaluate people's worth and value literally and sometimes figuratively based on what they see on their character, their gear level, their items, and what their character looks like. That's it. Not the propensity of why are they here? Why are they here on this very hour? Why are they asking me for help? Why should I help them? All those questions are kind of out. It's prescribed by a system. It's so true. I can even communicate without touching the voice. Yeah, every game has a ping system. It has functional readouts. It even has a lot of other games. Like, I'm not sure specific games you're referring to, but there's also auto help, functional like indicators. So things like when people are playing, they don't even realize that the game is designed so that they draw attention to you if you're at risk. For example, people no longer have to look at someone who's in trouble in a game because the game tells you when that person's in trouble. You know, like blinkers. Like imagine a game that doesn't have blinkers from directions. The more indicators you have to synergize with players, right? Like the less you have to communicate anymore. So it's removing all of that generally, and it helps. Here's a little slight deep cut before we go into the. I really need to review this, but it helps with playing the game. It does not. It removes all the necessity to practice any of those skills. Convenience removes skill development. And being able to understand what you're giving up for that convenience is a great place to start, right? You can choose then to go back to develop those skills if you want. I personally do because it's fun. I do like challenges, and challenges are pretty much doing everything the game isn't helping you do. So one of the things about MMOs is understanding the community at large, or understanding the business model or the philosophy of the game, not necessarily the game mechanics itself, because I'm pretty sure 99.9% of people who are still playing this game are pretty familiar with the game mechanics, right? So practicing all the things that are not in the game is a great example. Convenience. What's a great example of a convenience? You might not think of it this way, but I also think of it in lifestyle changes. Fast food. You are exchanging conveniences for something. There's a trade-off. Convenience comes with under-practiced skills, trade-off skills. What are you doing when you eat out? You aren't cooking. What are you doing when you eat out? You don't have to know what's in your food. What did you gain? Well, you don't have to practice cooking. You don't have to know what's in your food. Buying an energy supplement. Well, you don't have to know what's in the energy if you trust the product, right? You can make your own energy drinks. Then what do you sacrifice? You sacrifice convenience and possibly the expertise of other people. You know, you might be thinking, oh yeah, but they're all traps and greedy people. And say, okay, so you make your own energy drink. That's great. What do you do about pharmaceuticals? It's like, well, you can invent your own medicine if you want, or you trust the, legacy of a lot of people, but then you don't have that skill. You don't know what's in your medicine, right? So there's all these trade-offs, and it's great to have a little bit perspective on it. I think when you're really happy and you're playing things and you have things you love, that is the best opportunity, in my opinion, to think about all the skills you don't practice because they're there. And at your best is, in my opinion, the best opportunity to do things that are at your worst. Not when it is at your worst that you finally develop skills that you need. And life skills are the ones that I worry so much about the current entertainment space, the current online space. When it is time that you think you need a skill, it's probably the worst time to develop that skill. Adults, right? Adults tend to be the placeholder for prepping you, preventive measures, developing skills that eventually you probably encounter at some way because you can't possibly see that in hindsight. Online, there's none of that. It's so difficult for someone who always chooses what they want to do, what they want to see, what they want to consume, and everything panders to you, so all the designs are done to make you feel better in that moment. You can often not have the foresight to develop a skill that will be useful later. So unfortunately, those are the best times when you are really happy, you have lots of friends, you're feeling great about yourself. Those are the best times to pay up that emotional investment and expand. I think feeling great about your life and being consistently happy, or being consistently at least satisfied, not necessarily happy, content or sufficient, is being ahead of life, as in constantly developing skills as a buffer for life. So when something comes up, you're already ready for it. And the easiest, one of the lowest barriers to developing skills you don't want to develop at all is when you're feeling the best. The internet doesn't do that. They don't challenge you to do challenging things at your best.